Well, thanks very much for joining me for this short video about the coming gospel reading. And by the way, if you have time, please look at all of Mark chapter 12. And the reason is, it is a series of acrimonious debates that absolutely set the stage for this final debate. And by the way, if you're willing to, just hit pause and take a look at my translation that is on the bottom of this, and then come back to the video. Let me point out a few aspects of what I have trying to do. I have set it up in such a way as to demonstrate that Mark is doing something he often does, which is to set a story in the stream of a series of stories. And he does that with a very interesting use of participles, present participles, but they can indicate past time continuing to the present. The other kind of thing he does that is absolutely typical of Mark is to present two characters juxtaposed with each other, each having mutual respect but a different point of view. In this case, the man I'm calling the Torah Keeper or scribe and Jesus himself. And the reason we know this is what's happening is, if you do a Greek word count, what you will see is they have almost exactly the same number of Greek words given to them by speech. In the 60s. That's remarkable. That's something the other gospel writers would not ever allow. It allows this keeper of Torah, this scribe, this learned man, who is concerned for spreading the Torah amongst common people, rather than the priesthood demanding all of its cultic taxes and requirements. This Torah keeper is a man of honor. Now, we know that because Mark does something else. He goes internal, and he allows us, by means of the omniscient storyteller, to read the character of both Jesus and the Torah keeper. The Torah keeper, listening to the way Jesus has entertained all of these conflicted questions coming to him, determines in his mind that the way Jesus has answered is sound. I translate sound. The word is that all-purpose adverb kalos with the omega, and that really has to be nuanced by its setting. And so here he is saying this Jesus is sound as he works with the Torah. And then later, when Jesus tells him what he thinks is the great commandment, he answers, well, you have answered very sound. This is good. This is good. And then he recites in other words than the old text, which I've conveyed in Jesus' speech by the King James, because that echoes the old-timey quality of the way Jesus is speaking. He answers in a more intellectual way, in the third person, avoiding the name Yahweh, and then concluding with something interesting. He adds these two together taken as a commandment, because there's a play backwards and forward with singular and plural you have to kind of watch out for. He says this is far more important than the burnt offerings that the temple demands and the many sacrifices it requires in offerings. Thus Mark has placed him very squarely in the honorable part of Judaism in Mark's consideration that is concerned with the inheritance of Torah and making Torah present for all people. But Jesus also has internal thoughts about this man. And there we find the Greek word used in his estimation of the Torah keeper that is used nowhere else in the New Testament. It's a very oddly formatted word that has links with the Greek word nous, intelligence. And Jesus says, this Torah keeper speaks soundly. But then at the end, we have a typical Mark closure, a kind of what Robert Funk would call a conversation stopper. And Mark will do this. And the conversation stopper is this. Listen, you are not far distant from God's reality that I have been announcing. That's a gap for us. And I encourage you to make that a creative gap. What does that mean? Is there something else that he needs to do? And notice that Mark does not have Jesus say, you lack only one thing. He is close. How close? Is he close in mind? Is he close in spirit? Does he need to step out physically, become a follower? We don't know. There's another important creative part for you to perhaps reflect on. And that is absolutely buried in the response of the Torah keeper, who is saying all of these religious requirements and cultic demands, they are nothing. They are nothing in contrast with the dual love command. And so, in our context, I invite you to conduct critical thinking about what it is that religion, even Christian religion, has put before love and the requirement to use all intelligence. Notice that word keeps coming up, all intelligence and all mindfulness and all depth of reality in fulfilling love to the Creator and to one's fellow human. Have fun with this. I'll tell you, I sure did. I'll see you next week.